This is John Bailey, the epic voice of Honest Trailers, and you're listening to the Fiveish Fangirls podcast. It's a Fangirls podcast with five-ish people. The tangents and squee will continue. Squee.
The tangents and squee continue all the way to episode 473 of the Fiveish Fangirls podcast. I guess it comes down to a simple choice, really. Get busy living or get busy dying. Welcome, everyone, to this week's episode of the Fiveish Fangirls podcast. So glad you joined us. Let's start off like an Eric with a virtual table and see who's joined us this week.
This is Brittany in Bengal.
This is Holly from Wisconsin.
And this is Rachel in Indianapolis, Indiana. Hello, everyone.
Hello.
Hello.
Oi! Happy Monday. It won't be Monday by the time people hear this, but hey, you know, for us, it's Monday. Woohoo!
Yay!
Yay!
It was a good Monday until the end of the walk for me. Like, I was like, oh, yeah, it's a Monday. That makes sense.
Yeah, song stuck in my head, Monday. Look at to me, except for my cases. I might get this paperwork done before 3. You know.
Yeah. At least we aren't breaking into the Boomtown Rats version of a song with Monday in it.
Yeah.
I have a reason to like Monday, and it's called this.
Yes.
You gals.
Yeah. I mean, all things considering, Mondays are not that bad.
No.
With the work I do, Mondays, they are busy, but it goes by quick.
Mm-hmm.
Fridays are so it's like my entire universe is backwards. So excuse me. Now I'm choking on my own excitement. Or is that resentment? Who knows? Anyway, news. We don't have a whole lot in the way. We don't really have anything in the way of fandom news. We have podcasting related news, including some 10 o'clock podcasting related news. So, but if you don't follow them, then you may have not seen this, but our brothers, our adopted brothers, are essentially the show that our show spun off of. We are the Sarah Jane Adventures to their Doctor Who. Traveling the Vortex, they have decided to hang up the Fezzes and the Stetsons, and are closing the doors to the TARDIS with the Traveling Vortex podcast. Unfortunately, life has just gotten in the way. So, not that there isn't a lot to talk about. I mean, there's still a lot of Big Finish and a lot of books and a lot of comics and all that stuff. But, that's just the way things go sometimes. So, it is sad to see that announcement. But at the same time, I know myself, I am eternally grateful for Ron, Glenn, and Keith for starting their show. Not like they were in it like a year, I think, ish, by the time I discovered them, as I was jumping into Doctor Who. And at the time, the podcasts had not exploded like they do now. So when I went to, I had an iPod at the time.
Same here.
And went into podcasts on iTunes and looked for Doctor Who. I mean, maybe a handful popped up.
I think they were like one of the maybe 10.
Yeah.
10
Maybe
that were
more
there.
double digits. Yeah. And I was looking at the descriptions, and part of their description was essentially 2 seasoned Doctor Who fans introduce a newbie to Doctor Who. And I'm like, oh, I'm a newbie to Doctor Who, so that's like me. So I'm going to listen to this one.
And another selling point was like United States, Central. I'm like, okay, sweet, because I've got some, from the pond where it originated. But it's like, okay, but I want to get some American, perspective too.
Yeah. Yep. So yeah, I started listening and immediately liked it. So I decided to jump into their back catalog, and while they're releasing new episodes, I am binging their back catalog until I completely caught up. And it's through listening to them and hearing their read feedback from people like Holly, aka not Glenn's Holly.
Right, exactly. Yeah, we beat that dead horse with a stick for a little while until I specified where I was from.
Yes. Yep, and Brittany and Chrissy and Dr. Phil and so made friends with the guys on social media, and then made friends with you guys and some of the others via social media. And I mean, we've, again, beating a dead horse. We told our origin story, I think, enough times that people should know it. Unless you're new here, in that case, just go back to episode 1. Or 10, I think. You could get our origin story. But yeah, it's because of them we are here.
Yes.
And while we don't do Doctor Who on the regular, because it's not the only topic we cover, we will definitely help carry that flag going forward. And we wish them all the best on their endeavors. I believe Sean is going to continue Afflicts with Friends. And the Keith and Glenn may pop up every now and then in places. So but it's one of those things that happens from time to time. As much as you want to set aside several hours every week to sit down and geek out with your friends, unfortunately, there are more pressing adulty things that need to be done, like jobs and, in some cases, childcare. Spending time with your loved ones. But hey, there's almost 600 episodes for people to go check out. So
yes,
they covered. They started with the Matt Smith era.
Yes,
and have covered all of New Who.
Yes.
And a good chunk of Classic Who, and a lot of Big Finish.
Oh yes.
So we hold nary a tiny little matchstick to the candle that is their Big Finish review catalog.
Exactly.
So,
oh yeah.
So yep. So there is that. And then also in your feeds, latest episode of Gold Standard, out on the main feed, where we talked about one of this year's nominees, nominated in several categories, the 2023 film Naiad. So you can go and listen to that. It's quite interesting because that's actually based on a true story. And the Diana, she is still alive. most of the people involved in the movie are not like amalgamations or anything. They're actual people, and most of them are still alive. And some had Diana and her best friend Bonnie were involved with the making of the film. And I think it's, not to completely, spoil the review, but I think it was done very, very well. I think a biopic essentially about an athlete was a very good choice for the filmmakers, considering that they had been all they'd made before were documentaries, and some of those involved sports. Probably their most well-known documentary is Free Solo, which is about mountain climbing or rock climbing, really. Which if you've not seen Free Solo, you should. It's a very good documentary. So you can watch that and see why, Naiad was a smart choice for them to move into feature filmmaking. So, but that is in the feeds, and then also in your feeds, if you are a subscriber to Drunk Cinema, then you probably have seen that my most recent appearance is now out for you to listen to. So you can listen to Charles, Suzanne, and I get increasingly buzzed, in my case, both on alcohol and sugar, while we watch Beetlejuice. So, so that was fun. Have I gotten a chance to go see the sequel yet? No, but I will. I promise. It's on the to-do list. Just finding time to go sit in a movie theater for several hours. And it's not been easy. So I've been finding other things to do, but we'll get to some of that here shortly. So next up, we have some feedback. We got some feedback from Shalane. She says, I thought you girls were going to do a whole episode dedicated to James Earl Jones, similar to what you did for Betty White and Chadwick Boseman. We thought about it, and we decided not to, at least for now. So, but he's been, a number of his works have been covered both on this podcast and on Gold Standard, among other places. So, there's a lot that you can go and listen to already. Plus, his name is still in the proverbial hat. So, but yeah, it was one of those that we might have gone ahead and done a full episode if we all could have been together. But personally, I prefer doing those sorts of commemorative episodes if we're all available. And that was not the case, unfortunately. So, but that being said, more of his stuff is, as we teased, one of his major roles is coming up very soon in the schedule. So, Yep. See, the only movies and TV shows I've seen James Earl Jones in are Star Wars, The Lion King, The Sandlot, Field of Dreams, and an episode of The Big Bang Theory. That is a very good episode of The Big Bang Theory, though.
Oh,
so.
yes. Because isn't that the one where they go
he and
Carrie
Sheldon spend the
Fisher?
day together, having just fun together, and not like treating him like, oh, I'm hanging out with Darth Vader, So. He also guest starred in an episode of Will and Grace, from the original run.
I vaguely remember that one.
Yes, and he takes one of Jack's acting classes. Or he's in a production that Jack's also involved. Anyway, Jack, if you've ever watched Will and Grace and Jack's like approach to acting is really the opposite of what most actors do. So Jack ends up teaching James Earl Jones a whole new way of acting. So it's quite funny. Let's see. Fun fact, there's a new Lion King movie coming out this year. Yes, there is. And it's all about Mufasa. Yes, it is. It's a Mufasa origin story. It'll probably be great. Let's see. And it feels fitting this being released in honor of James Earl Jones's passing. I don't think it's necessarily it's not like they knew he was gonna be gone before this movie was released. I think that's just more just universe timing, serendipity, I guess. So, but I would not be surprised that, a little something gets added to the end of the movie, in honor of James Earl Jones, to the end credits. So, also, I never knew James Earl Jones did Broadway shows. Yes, he did. Imagine being in The Lion King on Broadway. What an experience that would be. I don't think he was ever in The Lion King on Broadway. I don't think he was really much of a song and dance man. I think he was more your straight plays. More than anything. Very much, some Shakespeare, of course, Othello, Hamlet, that's King Lear, but also, Of Mice and Men, Fences on Golden Pond, Cat on a Hot Tin Roof, Driving Miss Daisy, that sort of thing. So, but yeah, I think, musical's not really his thing. So, but that's okay. Let's see here. Since the only movies and shows I've seen Kelsey Grammer in are Anastasia, Toy Story 2, Mickey's Once Upon a Christmas, Barbie of Swan Lake, Frasier, Storks, and a cameo in The Marvelous Mrs. Maisel. Going back to Amanda Seyfried, I saw her briefly in the HBO series Big Love, which was about a man with 3 different wives. It starred the late Bill Paxton and Ginnifer Goodwin. It's kind of felt like a soap opera, and I thought it was pretty dumb. Yeah, if you're not into soap opera type things, I could.
Yeah, and that was a soap opera. Let me tell you.
Yeah. Yeah. So yeah, it's not necessarily everybody's cup of tea. So
nope.
I want soap operas. I'll watch an actual soap opera. Yeah. Give me the cheesy soap opera stuff,
With the evil twin. Oh, where'd you come from? Oh, you died? No, I pulled a master. Hey, I'm back.
Yeah, exactly. That's the type of soap opera stuff we want. All right, and then we also got some feedback from Johnsy.
Yay,
some of this you'll get context after. So we'll give you context here shortly. So some of it you're gonna be like, "What the hell is he talking about?" You will understand shortly, I promise.
Please stand by.
Yes. So he says, "Hi, fangirls. Rachel and I are just now back home and out on parole from Shawshank. Wanted to throw it into your conversation a couple of pieces of contraband and ask a question." This is what happens when I drive and he gets all the time in the world to sit and think. I'll sit in the passenger seat. From me, meaning him, especially the attic, aka the 300-man maximum security cell. The entire time we walked around that place, I actually felt a general ick. No specific smell, no specific detail. It just felt like time and events put an emotional curse on the vibe in there. No windows, one door. Rachel and I visited a castle in Ohio. Yes, we did. Question: did you, like me, often see Shawshank Redemption on TV back in the day and become committed to watching the rest of it each time? Thanks, Chauncey, aka Sasquatch. P.S. Have you seen the Arkham Shawshank Asylum Robot Chicken parody? I can't say I have. I've got it pulled up here. I will link it in the show notes.
I watch
Adult Swim much.
I've watched Adult Swim and I've watched Robot Chicken, but it was mostly the Star Wars stuff. I have not done the Shawshank.
Yeah.
No, same.
But we will put that in the show notes. So.
Yes, and I will add that to the to-do list.
Yeah.
And that general ick, I'm just wondering if it's just not bad juju from all the stuff that went down in that prison over the course of the
lifetime of it.
Yeah, the lifetime of it. Yeah, that's what I'm just wondering if that's just, some people are so attuned to that, so.
Could be. Yeah. This is going to make for a very interesting discussion. This is our thank you, Chauncey Sasquatch, for your feedback that I asked for. I was like,
should the assignment.
Right home. You could send us feedback. So, and of course, the entire car ride home. Did he send it? No, he waited till we got home. But that's okay. Whatever.
But I can understand like what he's talking about because this past summer I went not as famous, but I went to like this old jail toy museum thing, and I had like a creepy feeling because we went like those downstairs with like the what am I trying to think of, like solitary confinement.
Yeah.
And that was so creepy.
Yeah.
And that really weird feeling the entire time.
Yeah. 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 So if you haven't figured out by now,
what our topic of discussion is.
This week's topic is we're talking about the Shawshank Redemption. And some of y'all might be like, well, that's kind of out of left field for you ladies. Yes and no. Here's the thing. One, the fact that we've been doing this for over 10 years and we've not talked any Stephen King at this point is a little weird.
True. And this is probably one of the...
He is in pop culture.
Right.
Yep.
He also is probably...
Yeah. And this is probably one of the better ones to kind of edge ourselves into.
It is one of the best adaptations of his works. 3, technically, this was a box office bust.
Which is surprising.
This is one of those movies that we've talked about in the past that people may not realize because now it is so beloved.
It's cult classic.
But you don't realize that when it was released, it didn't even make back its money.
Which is surprising.
Back its money.
Considering the cast.
Yes.
That's in it.
Yes.
I mean.
It was
Clancy Brown, for crying out loud.
Yeah. Well, and I think part of it was, and Morgan Freeman has said this after the fact, that part of it was the fact that we're talking about the mid-90s. This came out 30 years ago, 1994. They just had a big 30th anniversary celebration back in August, out in Mansfield. And Morgan Freeman said, in the mid-90s, you really had to rely on word of mouth.
True, because social media is not like it is today.
Well, yeah, it didn't exist.
Right.
Exactly.
You had the newspaper, and magazines, and maybe you had late night talk shows, and daytime talk shows,
and maybe 1 or 2 TV trailers if you could afford that.
Yes, exactly. So, and this is the summer of 1994. 1994
Olympics.
in general for film was a big year. 1994 is one of those stupidly big years of major notable film releases. So a lot of notable, some not so much, because there were a lot of people that were approached for this movie and turned them down because they were doing things like, I don't know, Tom Hanks was doing Forrest Gump. And Brad Pitt was doing Interview with a Vampire. And stuff like that. So,
And
that's
I
possible.
think,
It's in Waterworld, but the less we talk about that, the better.
yeah. And I'm thinking too, with just like you're naming off the names of all the films, it's just like I think they kind of learned their lesson with, oh my, we don't want to blow up the film market too much, or that, hey, this could be a big blockbuster. Let's wait and put it out later, because if we try to put it up against this, it's gonna tank.
Right.
And we're not going to make our money back. So I'm thinking that might be another case too, as why it didn't do as good as it probably should have. But who knows?
Yeah.
I mean, that's one way of looking at it.
We're not out, because the thing is Frank Darabont, who was, who directed this, had been, and presumably still is, friends with Stephen King. And because of their friendship, Frank wanted to, he had been doing movies like The Fly 2, and other like second and third in a IP horror type movies that did not necessarily do that well. And his option was to maybe do another horror type movie, and he's like, no, I don't want to do another horror type movie. And so he wrote Stephen King, and I was like, I really like it, because Shawshank it's a novella. It appears in a book of 3 other stories, that together would equal the page amount for what is considered a novel. So it's not a short story, but it's not a full-length novel either. And the novella is told completely from Red's perspective. But Frank approached his friend Stephen King and was like, I really like this story. I think I can make it into a feature-length movie. What do you think? And he optioned it for $5,000. Stephen King never cashed the check. In fact, he ended up framing it and sending it back to Frank, saying, if you ever need $5,000 for something, here you go.
Break glass in case of emergency.
Yes, exactly. So I guess it helps to be friends with Stephen King. Although apparently Stephen King also has supposedly he has a personal, like, I don't want to say rule, but amateur filmmakers, aspiring filmmakers, can option his short stories for $1.
Cool.
So if you know any burgeoning filmmakers out there that want to try your hat at doing your own, adapting a short story, apparently you can option from Stephen King for $1.
Hey, and what a better way to get your teeth wet.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. So Frank wrote the script, and he word got around, and he people saw it and started approaching Frank like, hey, I want to be in this, or hey, I want to direct this. Like Rob Reiner offered Frank $2.5 million to do the Shawshank Redemption. Granted, Rob Reiner had experience adapting Stephen King because he did The Body,
right?
Which because is the movie Stand By Me. But and Frank really considered it, because $2.5 million That's a lot of money, especially in the 90s. But he's like, no. He's like, I want to do it. So he did, and even then, word got around, and people were like, dude, I want to be in this. Like, people like Charlie Sheen were like knocking on his door, like, dude, I really want to be in this. And he was like, no, I'm gonna do this my way. And that's exactly what he did. So but he eventually got the chance to, like, sit down and actually do a proper script. It took him about 8 weeks. And obviously expanded it, because the novella, there are characters mentioned that do not get nearly as much like backstory and screen time as they do in the movie. As this is a very faithful adaptation, but obviously it's not an exact. I don't think there are really any adaptations out there that are exact, just because there's some things you can't do.
Right.
Or are really, really hard to do in film, that if you're just writing words and you can let the people build the picture in their mind. So we'll talk about the specifics about the characters and so how some things changed. But he was very much inspired by Mr. Smith Goes to Washington and Goodfellas, and things like that. And although and even though Reiner did not get to direct it, Castle Rock Entertainment, which Reiner helped co-found, did help distribute it, so and help with the production. So yeah, the original novella is actually titled Rita Hayworth and the Shawshank Redemption. It was published in 1982. And the collection that it appears in is called Different Seasons. And it was reprinted in 2009 in a collection called Stephen King Goes to the Movies. And really was written because as a kid, King had watched a lot of like prison movies. And that struck him, because this is not. I mean, he's written other things that take place in like prisons and with criminals and stuff. I mean, not long, like 5 years after this gets released, The Green Mile is released, which also takes place in a prison, but it has like some supernatural elements tied to it. This is just kind of a straight up like character driven story. There's no supernatural stuff. There's no weird like horror. Like everything is set in reality, which is unusual for King. So of course it's set in Maine, which, yay Brittany. It's like, I lived in the same state as Stephen King. A lot of his stuff is set in Maine because it's where he lives and that's what he knows. And in fact, there are some location and character crossover with other Stephen King stories along with this. But it takes, like I said, it's the short, or the novella is entirely from Red's perspective, like he's writing like his memoirs. or writing in a diary to some, unknown reader who may come across it, it's like, may come across it someday and read it. And they're like, this is my account of, my time at Shawshank, the same time that Andy Dufresne was there. So you're going to get everything either from events you're either going to get based on what Red actually sees or hears secondhand, sometimes third hand, fourth hand from other people. And in some cases, he doesn't have any information, so he just postulates, like Andy's escape. He actually has no idea how Andy pulled it off, so what he tells us is how he thinks Andy pulled it off. So, obviously, with the movie, because of the power of cinema, we're able to get the perspective of a number of characters and actually see these things play out regardless of who may have actually been there to witness, and be able to provide testimony. So that's kind of the TLDR is, the story of this guy, Red, who is imprisoned at Shawshank State Penitentiary, and he went to Shawshank in the late 30s, and then about 10 years later, Andy Dufresne arrives at Shawshank, who is there serving two concurrent life sentences for supposedly killing his wife and her lover, who is a golf pro. So Red is there because he killed his wife, which he meant to do, but accidentally also killed his neighbor and the neighbor's kid because they were not supposed to be in the car with his wife, whose brakes he had just rigged to fail. So according to Red, he's the only person in Shawshank who's actually guilty. He's been served to 3 life sentences for that. But in his time there, he's got some competition, but he becomes the guy that prisoners go to if you need anything. He is the guy who can get you things. So over the course of the time that Andy's there, we learn about Andy's experiences with the other prisoners, Red, the guards, the warden. In this case, there's 3 wardens during the time period that Andy is there. Because in the book, Andy's there for almost 30 years. In the movie, he's there for slightly under 20. And ultimately his escape and what Red thinks happened after the fact, based on what the things Andy had told him before he seemingly disappeared into thin air. So that's a TLDR for the novella and kind of the movie too. But it's more expanded. So that being said, obviously the novella was known by people, and people were excited to hear that it was being adapted into a film. Of course, when you're making a movie about a prison in Maine, you're not going to film in Maine. You almost never film where things are actually set. That's just the nature of the industry. I'm so sorry, Brittany. Yeah. That being said, they wanted someplace inexpensive to film that would work, at the very least for the exterior and some of the interiors. a lot of the prison interiors, if they weren't taking place in the cells, were filmed all in the same location. And that is the Ohio State Reformatory, which is in Mansfield, Ohio, which is about 4 hours east of Indianapolis. It's kind of in the middle of nowhere, Ohio, because it is in between Columbus and Cleveland. So, but I've been aware that it existed there for a while, and it was one of those things where it's like, oh, we should go there one of these days. And since starting my new job, since I'm very busy during the week, Shanti and I have made it a thing to try and find things we can do together for like a day trip or a quick weekend away, that sort of thing. So we're not feeling like we're just like work, weekend off, recover, work, weekend off, recover, that sort of thing. So I was like, hey, want to go to Shawshank? And he was like, sure. So we did. That's what we did over the weekend. We drove out there Friday evening and stayed at Holiday Inn, about 15 minutes away from the location, and got up the next morning and drove out there. And if you go to the website, which I'll have linked in the show notes, but the reformatory is very interesting because it was a working prison. It was at the time in the late 1800s. There was a need for kind of almost a halfway prison as opposed to a halfway house, because they had a maximum security facility, and then they had kind of a minimum security facility. But what the state realized they needed was a third option where they could send the people that they thought could be reformed, that they thought maybe just needed maybe to learn a trade or something like that. And so they hired this architect, Levi Schofield, who was from Cleveland, and built what they considered an intermediate penitentiary, because it accepted inmates who were too old for juvenile corrections, but their offenses were less severe and therefore didn't need to go to the Ohio State Penitentiary, which was your maximum security. Its first inmates arrived in 1896, and the idea was to truly reform and rehabilitate the inmates. So there was religion, education, and trade. Inmates were admitted for 18 months, and if they showed progress, they could be released. If not, they received another 18 months. And the model itself actually was very successful, and they had a high success rate and a low recidivism rate, which is how recidivism is someone who's been convicted of a crime, gets released from jail, and ends up back in jail. That's like a SAT word right there. However, there were, after the century turned into the 1900s, there were some issues just in the state in general that ended up having ripple effects that affected to the OSR. One of those was prohibition. There were a lot, prohibition and the Great Depression. Those two combined caused the population to bulge, essentially. because you got people getting arrested for breaking prohibition, which in the grand scheme of things, not that major of a crime. But still, people got arrested. And then when the Great Depression hit, there were a lot of people that would commit big enough crimes to be sent to this facility because they know that they would have a roof over their head and get 3 meals a day instead of living on the street. So there were a lot of people that were purposely getting in trouble, going to jail, and then when their 18 months were up, making sure that they got sent back in so that they could get 3 square meals a day. Obviously, after the Great Depression, the economy corrected itself. Some people were able to go back out. Problem was, even if you reached a point where you could go back out because like the economy is better and you're like, oh, this might not be so bad, you now have a record, which means it's still going to be hard for you to get a job.
Yep.
So hence the recidivism. It's kind of a vicious cycle. The other thing is in 1930, sometime in the 1930s, the Ohio State Penitentiary, which was their maximum security prison, caught on fire and was very, very damaged. And they were like, well, we have all these prisoners that we can't keep here now because the place is damaged. Let's send them over to the OSR. And the OSR was all like, we're not built to house maximum security prisoners. Like, I mean, maximum security are for like the worst of the worst, your very violent offenders, your murderers, your rapists, that sort of thing. And OSR was not built for that. And they were like, well, too bad, you're getting 300 prisoners, so figure out something. So what they did is off of the wing where the chapel is, which I believe is on the west side of the building, there was attic space. And this is what Chauncey was referring to. Big, huge attic space, like really like 20, 30 foot tall ceilings. This is like maybe not a football field long, but maybe like half a football field long. So really long, decent width, one door in and out, no windows. And they just put in a bunch of bunks and essentially some pots to piss in, and put all those guys in there and lock the door. So you have 300 maximum security grade prisoners locked in this attic for days on end. They would be let out long enough to go eat, and they would have to time it so that these guys never encountered the non max prisoners. It was it did have lights. It did not have like any air conditioning or heating or anything. Again, this is the 1930s. So when it was lights out, it was lights out, and it was pitch black. They took us in there and they'd shut the door, and our tour guide was telling us all about it, and she was like, when it's lights out, it's lights out, and the other gal helped assist turn the lights out. And thankfully we were wearing headsets so that she could speak into like a little microphone thing, and it would go right into our ears, and they had little lights on them to let us know that they were on and working. So it wasn't completely pitch black, but suddenly there were 30 just like little green lights. The only source of light for a few seconds. But yeah, imagine what 300 and eventually even more, because they tried to cram some more in there. 300 maximum security prisoners essentially locked like sardines in an attic for months was probably like. They essentially, if any of the guards or any of the staff heard any noise, they ignored it. Even if it sounded like they were tearing the place apart and killing each other, they let it happen. Because there was only one door. So if anyone came to unlock that door, and if they were ready, that single person didn't stand a chance against the 300 guys on the other side of that door. So they were essentially like caged animals. And they just kind of let nature take its course. If you were somebody locked in there and it was the middle of the night and you realized you had to go to the bathroom, and the closest thing they had to an actual bathroom was at the far end of, it was literally at the wall that was at the other end opposite of the door. So if you got up, first you had to find your way there, essentially in pitch black. Hope you don't trip over anybody, kick anybody, make too much noise, piss off the wrong person. And if you do make it, do your business, then you got to find your way back to your bunk again without kicking anybody, disturbing anybody, making too much noise, not accidentally getting into the wrong bunk and suddenly somebody accuse you of maybe trying something in the middle of the night. So yeah, it was
little life and death just to go to the bathroom. That's
yeah. So yeah, it was like it was weird because when they first took us in there, we did not know that that's what that space had been used for. We just thought they were taking us into attic space just to see it, because right now the East Wing, which is usually part of most of the tours, because they offer several different tour options. We ended up doing the one that includes a guided tour and then a bus tour to take you to some of the filming locations off of the property that they also, elsewhere in Mansfield. And usually the East Wing is where they take you, but that wing is currently closed because they're switching over to their haunted house.
Oh, okay.
And that's the wing that gets used for it. So yeah, so she took it. Our tour guide was like, well, since you didn't get to see the East Wing, we'll take you up the attic. And then she actually took us a quick walk by some of the cells in the West Wing, which that area, there's a lot of restoration going on, which we'll get to the restoration because that's a big part of its involved the building's involvement in the making of the movie. When I part of the group, a lot of single file, because it's very labyrinth-esque, very narrow hallways and walkways and doorways. And we had like 30 people in our tour group. But actually, when I first walked into the attic, I thought it smelled like smoke, but not like fire camp smoke, but like when you're smoking like meat.
Oh.
Like if you're smoking like something to barbecue,
right,
or like bacon or something. That's what it smelled like to me. But I even said something to Chauncey. He just kind of looked at me like, of course you think you smell bacon. I didn't get breakfast that morning because I overslept and missed the breakfast at the hotel. But they gave us a few minutes to roam and walk up and walk some of the space of the attic. They just told us to not touch anything. Well, we weren't supposed to touch anything anywhere because there's a lot of lead paint, which you don't even want to touch, let alone eat, because that's bad. There's just a lot of like just clutter. because they're just doing restoration just all over the place. So there was some scaffolding set up there in the attic, and they had like buckets, and stuff, and ladders strewn all over the place and that sort of thing. And there's a room that is the control room for the air units that are now in that attic that help air condition the rest of at least that part of the building. Not the attic, but the ducts for the AC units sit in there. So like, stay away from the mechanical stuff because it's active. So, but she's like, walk up and down, see some of the prisoners decided that the white walls would make for a great canvas for them to either write things or maybe draw things, especially of the womanly variety, because they had not seen a woman in a long time and may not for a long time. So yeah, I found one of those drawings. Not bad for, guy with a pencil and a textured wall. So some of them just wrote like their name and like their prisoner number just to be like, I existed, I was here, that sort of thing.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, that was kind of creepy. So yeah. So that's what Chauncey is referring to, is the 300 plus prisoner attic storage space, essentially. It's like, I know they're maximum security prisoners, but they're people, not your Christmas tree ornaments. But that's kind of how they were treated. And eventually the state decided that that particular model of reform was no longer really working. So they decided they were going to convert it into the entire thing into a max security prison, which it was never intended to be, and would have cost a lot of money to convert. So the conditions just got really bad. Eventually the inmates sued the state of Ohio because the conditions had gotten so bad. They actually won. And so the state of Ohio is like, okay, we'll build a new facility, which they did. It is right behind the OSR. On our tour, at one point, one of the rooms that they took us has windows facing the new active maximum security prison. And they have signage up, but our tour guide made sure to tell us in no uncertain terms, you can take all the pictures you want except out of those windows, because apparently it is a low-class felony to take photos of an actively working prison from an elevated area.
Huh.
Yeah. I guess because, people might think you're casing the joint to figure out how to bust somebody out, I guess, or help them escape. So yeah, they were like, yeah, you can look, but don't take any pictures out those windows. I'm like, okay. I didn't even know there was an actual active prison behind us. And I was like, yeah. She was like, yeah, sometimes you stand there, you can see guys out in the yard, like, doing stuff. And I'm like, okay, that's kind of creepy.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, they built a new facility, moved the guys over there. The building sat empty for a while, and the state actually did have plans to demolish it. But as our tour guide said, the great thing about the state of Ohio is when they decide to demolish something, they take their sweet time doing it. So when Castle Rock came along, and we're like, hey, we're looking for places to, we're scoping out sites to film this movie, and we like the look of your building. at least from the outside, can we film here? And the state was all like, yeah, but if you're going to use the inside, it's going to need a little work. And I guess Castle Rock was like, okay. So they did the work they needed to do in the rooms that they needed. Hence why things like the warden's office is filmed inside the OSR. Brooks's halfway house room is actually filmed in a room inside the OSR. The library, the cafeteria, so places like that weren't the cells were filmed in the OSR. The prison cells themselves are a set. Built very much to look like what the OSR would have looked like in its heyday. But the cell blocks themselves are just in desperate need of attention. They're very, very worn. That being said, the locks on the doors still work. So they also told us before we started our tour that in no uncertain terms do you go in a cell and shut the door. Because you will get locked inside and they don't have keys.
Oh, God.
There is one guy in the state of Ohio that's a locksmith that is trained and has the ability to work on these locks because they are vintage. And our tour guide said that in her 6 years of working there, she has never had to call the locksmith, but she knows that the last time they had to, they sent the bill to the person who got locked in, and the locksmith bill was for $1,500.
Whew.
Ouch.
So yeah. So the cells may look like crap, but hey, the locks still work. So like, okay, which I'm pretty sure is partially why they took us past those cells as quickly as they did. So nobody got any bright ideas. Because I imagine, now that lockpick bill would be even higher. Because it's a very specialized, you can't just go to the yellow pages and go to locksmiths and just pick anybody. No, it's a singular guy within the state of Ohio. So, oh my. So yeah. So that was interesting. The guided tour, it covers a lot of ground. That being said, there is also space that you can tour on your own. If you don't want a guided tour, you can just purchase a ticket and do a self-guided tour, and just follow the signage. But after we came back from the bus, we still had a little bit of time before they were closing for the day. So it gave us just enough time to try and see some of the stuff that we missed, because it's not part of the guided tour. And there are 2 museums within the OSR building. On one floor, it is a museum really kind of dedicated to prisons in Ohio. So not just the OSR. So it talks about the penitentiary, the state penitentiary, which was the Max prison before it burned down. They have on display the electric chair that the state penitentiary used. That I believe our tour guide said during its use at that facility took the lives of 96 prisoners, including 3 women. It was never used at the OSR. It is just on display at the OSR because the building it was in and being used in burned. And they didn't want that piece of history to just end up somewhere. There are, I will post up. I'll take the pictures, at least some of the pictures I took on the tour, and put them in an album on our Facebook page so y'all can see what it is I'm talking about. But there were things like souvenirs, because apparently in the 1920s, if you visited a prison, that there was a gift shop, so you could buy souvenirs, which was really weird, but hey, whatever. And they were legit souvenirs. Like there was like china, like decorative plates with like the facility like painted on it. You could buy like novelty postcards that on one side had the pictures and names of all the guys who'd been executed up to the point that the postcard was printed. And, early 20th century people were weird, I guess. I don't know. There was a whole section about the in prison band and the guy that led it, and how they would do performances. They actually had some recordings of them playing. They would learn how to make their instruments out of wood. There was a whole display of shanks that had been found over the years. They're working on a more permanent section of the equivalent of the OSR, but for women, because one did exist. And while for the men, they did things like woodworking and things like that. Over the women, they learned how to sew, that sort of thing, which came in very handy during the World Wars. And then on another floor is all the Shawshank specific stuff. And that includes costumes, props, movie posters, pieces of the script that are signed by the cast and crew, video, some behind the scenes things, some actual, the warden's office, Warden Norton's office is set up the way it looked in the movie. And the safe is back in its location. Because the thing is, like I was saying, the state of Ohio intended to knock this building down. But as I said, apparently the state of Ohio, when they decide to knock down something, they take their sweet time. So when Castle Rock came along, they were like, hey, can we film here? And they were like, sure, as long as you're willing to do the work to make whatever spaces you're going to be filming look the way you want them to. And they were like, great. So they left and, did their production planning. And meantime, the state was moving ahead with like, okay, well, they're going to film, and then we're going to knock, once they're done, we'll knock this place down. And they showed up, Frank, the cast, the crew, everybody showed up for the first day of filming. And within a few hours of them getting there and starting their first day of filming, the demolition crew showed up, not realizing that filming had not finished, let alone really started. So if they had not shown up where they did to start filming, then when they did show up, like one of the rooms would have been missing. At the very least, there would have been some walls that were there before. So state of Ohio was like, whoops, our bad, we'll come back when you're done. And Frank was all like, okay, we've got 78 days, and they got it done in 78 days. With again a good chunk of the filming taking place at the OSR, but also a number of other locations throughout Mansfield, including the grocery store where Brooks works first, and then Red does for a little bit. That is still standing. It's remodeled on the inside and a little bit on the outside, but they do have a very nice mural on the side of the wall with Morgan Freeman and the logo. That's one of the rest stops from the bus tour, where you get out, stretch your legs, use the bathroom, buy snacks. So about snacks at the the mart. The park, there's a small park in kind of downtown, air quotes, downtown Mansfield, because it's a small town. So whatever the equivalent of like the center of town would be. There's a small park with a gazebo and some other things commemorating some of their soldiers that fought in World War I. But that is also where there's a replica of the bench that Brooks sat at to feed the pigeons and other birds, hoping that baby Jake would come back and say hi to him, which was sad. I should mention that we get on the bus and they tell us, what's going to happen and the kind of the rules, don't stand up while the bus is moving, that sort of thing. They showed us a little introduction video from Frank himself. And then any time that we were on the bus just going somewhere, we watched the movie, which I don't know about the bus driver. I don't know how many times she's seen Shawshank, but I know she's probably heard Shawshank a number of times without actually seeing it. I didn't want to ask how many times she's actually had to hear the movie, but not actually see it. But we didn't get through the entire movie, but we did get as far as Brooks's story after he gets released, and I bawled like a baby. I was already feeling sentimental because they took us into the room that was doubled as Brooks's bedroom in the halfway house. And most of the bed and stuff are not the original. At one point the original beam that he carves Brooks was here and also uses to end his life. The original screen use beam had gone missing. And so the one in the room is a replica. And then several years ago, they were doing a tour, and whoever the tour guide was mentions that. And the guy was all like, I think I have the original out in my truck. Would you like it? Yeah. So yeah, he gave it to them. Unfortunately, it had not been kept in an ideal location, so it is very fragile. So it is in a glass display case with some of the other Shawshank stuff. They could not put it back in the beam, so the replica is what's there and will remain there. But even just standing there and even though knowing that's a replica, just knowing what happens to Brooks in the movie, it was just I was so sad. Especially because that's one of those things that gets expanded from the book. Brooks gets mentioned, and Jake the bird gets mentioned, although in the book Jake's a pigeon, not a crow, and he's not owned by Brooks. He's actually the pet of another inmate. And Jake dies in the book. Spoilers. It's an old book and it's an old movie. I'm gonna spoil everything. But in the book, Jake comes back and dies at the prison because he essentially starves to death because he doesn't know how to survive after being somebody's pet, because his owner gets released or sent to another facility or something. And then Brooks is mentioned, and the only thing that happened, and what they mentioned to Brooks is he ends up dying in a retirement home. So obviously the film way expanded that, and if you read the book towards the end, it ends with Red saying, that's how I think Andy Dufresne escaped. And, I don't know if he ever made it to Mexico and opened up his resort and all that stuff. But I'd like to think he did. And then they kind of get like a fake ending. And then it comes back and Red's all like, hey, didn't think you'd hear from me again, but guess what? I got paroled. And he tells a story about how he's got this room in this hotel, and he's working at the grocery store, and he doesn't like his boss, and he thinks he might rob the place so he can go back to prison because that's all he knows. And that's essentially what Brooks's story ends up becoming. But Brooks's does not end happily because because leading up to that, or when Red is telling the other guys when Brooks freaks out when he finds out he's finally getting paroled, is what Red refers to essentially institutionalization, where living inside the prison is the only thing you know, and you don't think you can survive on the outside world. And for someone like Brooks, who had been there for 50 years, that's a lot of time for society to move on without you and evolve and change. And that's exactly what happens to poor Brooks. Is he doesn't have his bird anymore. He's away from his friends. He's not working at his library anymore. So ultimately, he's like, as much as I could rob the place, rob my the place I work, and he says send me home. He decides that it's not worth it, and he ends up hanging himself. It's so sad. I mean, from the minute that Brooks is pushing Jake essentially out the window, saying, you're free now, I can't take care of you, you have to go, up until Brooks, you see Brooks's, I'm getting sad again, you see Brooks's body hanging from that beam where it says Brooks was here, where he's carved it into. I was bawling like a baby on the bus. And I did not care who saw. And Chauncey's like, are you okay? I'm like, it's so bad. Like, this poor old man.
Uh-huh.
So it's way sadder in the movie. And then they make you think that Red is going to do the same thing.
Oh yeah.
But he ultimately decides not to. He decides to get busy living instead of get busy dying.
Yep.
But yeah, to have Red, repeat the same thing and almost seem like, the cycle is going to repeat itself. A tricky little bit of storytelling there. And ultimately adds, to the film and the impact of the film, I think. But yeah, there is, you used to be able to see the oak tree. It's on private property, and has been for a long time, but you used to be able to see it from the side of the road. You could pull off and walk up to the fence and see the oak tree. Unfortunately, the oak tree was hit by lightning like 12 years ago. And then in 2016, it ultimately succumbed to Mother Nature and collapsed and had to be removed. So the oak tree is no longer something that you can even see from a distance. You can, from the end of the driveway, you can see the love nest / murder bungalow from the beginning of the movie. It's at a state park where they have cabins for rent, and that is one of them. So you don't want to go like wandering up there, because if somebody's rented out the cabin, you would probably freak them out. So we stayed at the end of the driveway, out on the street. But still, we got to see it. So that was really cool. And there's a couple other like exterior, just like locations. Like you can see the road where Red is riding the bus. He is riding the bus to Texas. And hoping that he's gonna, finally meet up with Andy. The rock wall, where the key to the literal key to Andy's new existence is hidden. That never really existed. That was built by the crew just for the filming, and then it was immediately taken down. The exterior of the building that's supposed to be the hotel / halfway house that Brooks and Red both ultimately get sent to, the exterior still exists, but obviously they did not use the interior. They used one of the rooms back at the OSR. So there's a number of places you can visit in Mansfield. You can visit Andy's little slice of heaven in Mexico, but you have to go to the U.S. Virgin Islands. It's not in Ohio. I'm sorry to tell you. So, bit more than a 4-hour drive from Indianapolis. But you can. It'll be a little harder to get there.
Probably cost a little more too.
Little bit. So.
Bus fares aren't as cheap as they were back in the day.
Yeah.
Nope.
Yep. So, but that being said, there's a flyer you can get, either from the OSR or any other place where they have like mid-Ohio touristy type brochures. And it is the Shawshank Trail self-guided driving tour. So of course it has the prison itself, the Brewer Hotel, which was the exterior for the halfway house, the pawn shop, Brooks's Bench, the movie theater where the movie premiered in Mansfield in 1994, the road to Buxton, the Foodway, the Russ's bus ride. Unfortunately, the Shawshank Oak Tree does not exist. That tells you that this brochure is a little out of date. The Malabar Farm State Park, which really has a lot of Hollywood connections, but that is where Pew Cabin, where the opening scene was filmed. But I guess that site has been used for some other things. We did not get to go to the bank. And we did not get to go to the courthouse or the wood shop. And then of course, Zinguanehu, is the Sandy Point National Wildlife Refuge at St. Croix in the U.S. Virgin Islands. So it's like, Ohio, U.S. Virgin Islands. So doing the bus tour, much easier than trying to follow this thing. I will give you that. I wasn't sure if paying all that money for it was going to be worth it, but I think it definitely was. But it was surreal. Visiting these locations, and because Chauncey and I listened to the audiobook on the drive out there, so that the book version was fresh in our minds, and then to do the tour, and then to be rewatching the movie while on the bus. It was just surreal to be visiting and seeing some of those locations, and know that we were standing in this place where this movie that has become so beloved by so many people, it was filmed. They filmed it in their 78 days and left, and it sat the building sat empty, and eventually the Mansfield Reformatory Preservation Society, which is a non-for-profit, was formed, and because they decided that the building was just too important to get knocked down. So, they filmed their nonprofit, the state of Ohio, eventually was all like, okay, fine, we won't knock it down, so we're going to sell it instead. And then whoever buys it can do whatever the hell they want with it. So they held a public auction. The Mansfield Reformatory Preservation Society were the only people to show up, and they won it for $1.
Nice.
So, yeah. They've been working on raising money to restore it best they can. So the money that you pay for the tours goes towards that. The haunted house, Blood Prison, as it's called, is one of their biggest fundraisers, and earns them a good chunk of the money they earn throughout the year. Obviously, there's a gift shop. Bought some stuff. I'm wearing my Shawshank T-shirt. That says "Get busy living" or "Get busy dying." It has a silhouette of the building, and it says Shawshank 30 years, 1994 to 2024. Bought some stickers and bought some magnets for our ever-growing collection on the fridge.
Cool.
Some of the, like I said, they offer a number of different tours. It depends on what time of year you go. Because again, if you go during the spooky season when they've started converting some of it for the haunted house, that's going to affect what you're able to visit within the building. If you are of the paranormal sort, they do offer ghost hunting tours. That is, but you have to specifically sign up for those if you're wanting to bring ghost hunting equipment. This is the first place I've ever visited where it has a sign outside that says, "Please no large bags," or, oversized equipment and ghost hunting equipment. So, because the place is supposed to be haunted.
I wouldn't doubt it.
Yeah, I would not doubt it either. So yeah, if you are want to do a tour, you need to of the paranormal sort, you need to make sure that that's specifically what you sign up for. But if you have the money and you have the time, I highly recommend the bus tour. Because you get the guided tour with a very knowledgeable guide that can give you all the ins and outs and all the little details. Of course, I'm not going to spill everything here because I want you all to go and give them your money if you can, because they are working on trying to protect this location for future generations. And but that tour, at least as of this recording, the guided tour is an hour and a half, and then the bus tour is about 2.5 hours. So you need to allocate about 4 hours for the whole thing. And that doesn't include any roaming that you might have time for after. But yeah, they do offer ghost hunts, ghost walks, late night ghost hunts, like 10 p.m. to 2 a.m. They offer a specific tour for like behind the scenes, lights on ish of their haunted house. If you want to do that, like if you want to see what it looks like all done up for the haunted house, you can do that without the scary bits. And then they have other events too, not just Blood Prison. They've got a convention for the paranormal. They have Incarceration, which is kind of a heavy metal music festival. And then like I said, they just had a big celebration for the 30th anniversary of the movie. They did it for the 25th and the 20th. So I guess mark your calendars for summer of 2029, possibly for the 35th anniversary, and see what kind of goodies might pop up between now and then, because some of the stuff that they have on display as far as props is stuff that they've unveiled for some of the anniversaries. This year for the 30th, it was the rock hammer. They managed to get their hands on the rock hammer. Cool. And it is now on display. For the 25th, I think it was for the 25th is when they got the safe, Norton safe. Which they had been installed in the room that worked as Norton's office. They cut a hole in the wall in their antique wall to fit the safe, including a hole in the back of it so that they could film from the inside the safe out. And then when they were done filming, they just took the safe out and like put up a patch. Because again, they thought they were going to tear the place down after they were done filming. The safe changed hands several times, until it landed in the hands of a safe collector, because people will collect anything. And, he eventually contacted the society and said, "Hey, I've got the safe." Or they tracked it down to him, and they were like, the 25th anniversary is coming up. Would you mind loaning it to us? Just so we can have it on display for the 25th anniversary. Pretty please. And he was like, "I'll do you one better. I'll let you have it permanently under one condition. Put it back in the wall." So that's what they did. So it is back in the wall where it was 30 years ago.
Nice.
Yeah. So yeah, that was pretty cool. So yeah, it was just like, it's living here in the Midwest, we're not the most, especially Indiana, we are not the most prolific when it comes to filming for things. Stuff even set in Indiana is not usually filmed here because we don't have any sort of tax breaks like other places do. Which is why Stranger Things is filmed in Atlanta, Georgia, which looks nothing like southern Indiana. I can tell you that because I've been to both. But whatever. But this was one of those things where it's like they happened to find a location that looked right, and based on the story that King had written, Brooks, is supposed to have been incarcerated in 1905. So, if you're following the timeline along with the timeline of the OSR, he would have been like the second wave of prisoners, to be put in there. After the original lot went in 1889 or whatever it was, more than likely. It's a bit of a time capsule, in a way. And the fact that, this filming location for, like I said, such a beloved movie, and it's right smack dab in the middle of Ohio. Even when we were doing Gold Standard, last week, and I was like, yeah, Chauncey and I are going to Shawshank this weekend, and Zan's all like, I keep meaning to go there, and it's like an hour and a half for her. she's like lived there pretty much her entire life, and she's never been. Even today, I'm wearing my shirt, and I wore it to work. This is nothing controversial or anything. It works. And our principal walked by at one point, and she's like, "What's your shirt say?" And she's like, "Oh, Shawshank." And I'm like, "Yeah. You ever been there? It's like 4 hours away." She's like, "No, I haven't yet, but anytime I see it's on TV, doesn't matter how far it is in the movie, I'm going to watch it." And I've heard that from so many people. Where they're like, if I'm flipping channels and it is on, it doesn't matter where it is in the movie, I am stopping what I am doing and watching it till the movie is over. So, Chauncey is like, because Chauncey has seen it a lot. He's like, I don't know how many times I've seen it, but it had been a while since he'd watched it last. And even just listening to the audiobook on the drive out there, he was like, this is hitting way different at the age we are now than when he first discovered the movie, when he was like a teenager.
Perspective.
And, perspective it's a lot, because I mean the story, because it does not have the supernatural aspects that a lot of Stephen King stories have. It is very grounded in reality. It is really easy to like want to root for Andy to escape. When he says that he is innocent and he did not kill his wife or her lover, you believe him way before Tommy comes along and is all like, "Oh yeah, in Rhode Island I was cellmate with this guy that said he killed some golf pro and another guy took the fall for it," which obviously corroborates Andy's story. You root, you want to believe that Andy's innocent, and you easily grow to hate our bad guys, the sisters. For if you know, you know. The lead, the head sister, he gets it way worse in the movie than he does in the book. He gets beaten, but he just ends up getting transferred to another facility. In the movie, he's paralyzed. In the book, Andy, there's three, because Andy is there for almost 30 years, 3 wardens come and go throughout his time. In this case, Norton is the worst of them, so they made Norton the sole warden for the film, and he's just awful. Absolutely awful, right from the moment you are first introduced to him, when Andy and the rest of the fresh fish, which, by the way, the prisoner going, fresh fish, that is Morgan Freeman's son.
Oh, cool.
Who also doubles as a young Red in his mugshot for when he goes up for parole. That is Morgan Freeman's son.
Makes sense.
Yeah. When Andy and the other fresh fish show up and we're introduced to Norton, like immediately, like the first thing out of his mouth is, the first rule of Fight Club, the first rule of Shawshank is no blasphemy. Before anything else, that is his number one rule. And I took this picture in his office, the room that double, that it was his office in the film that they shot in. And I don't think it's anything you actually see on screen, but there's a table that's kind of off in a little alcove, so it's kind of out of the way and not really a spot where I think the camera really would have needed to point. But there's this up on this table, push up against the wall, are this row of trophies, and you just look at them, and they're like the kind of trophies you'd expect for someone of his era who did sports in like high school and college. There's like bowling and baseball and basketball and that sort of thing. Very stereotypical, those kind of cheesy trophies where it's like, you got the generic posed person playing the sport in gold, air quotes, on top, and usually the base is like fake marble, and it's like a bright color, red or green or something. Usually gold plaque, and it's engraved. So, like, all of those, and they're varying sizes depending on the sport and how, what it is that he got the award for. But the one in the middle, that's the biggest and the shiniest, and because it's the biggest and smack dab in the middle, it's the fanciest, and it's got the most prominence. I immediately caught my attention, which I'm sure is the point. But the figure on top is a person wearing a cap and gown. And it's got like the little statues of, like, they kind of look like griffins or something with the wings, and then it says 1951 on it. And you figure, like, maybe that's like an academic thing. Like, maybe, as much as he's proud about his sports prowess, maybe he did something academic that he's especially proud of, and that's why this one is prominent. No, the little plaque on it, Salvation Bible School Scripture Memory Champion.
Interesting.
If that doesn't sum up Norton in a nutshell, I don't know what does.
Exactly.
That says so much about his character.
It says, oh, so much.
Oh, yes, it does. Yes, that explains so much. Oh, yeah. Just, anytime I saw something with him, I was just like, I just want to punch you. I thought, he took the coward's way out in the movie. Which is the extreme opposite of what happens to him in the novella, where he gets to retire and just goes off into obscurity. So, I mean, really, he does not come to justice either way in either version. But again, he took the coward's way out. But and same thing for the head guard. He gets arrested in the movie. I want to say in the novel, actually, he ends up becoming warden. Yeah, because the thing is in the movie, Andy gets hit, builds up his fortune that he is going to live on once he gets out, because he uses the essentially money laundering that he's doing for the prison, and has figured out how to skim a little off and set it aside for himself under an assumed name, a new identity that he's built for himself. In the book, he builds a new identity for himself in between getting found guilty and actually getting sent to Shawshank with help of a friend.
Okay.
When he realizes that he's going to jail, he's going to be there for a while, so Andy Dufresne sells everything he owns, takes that money, and gives it to this trusted friend. He uses some of it to create the obviously illegal fake papers, new social security card, new driver's license, all that stuff for this new persona, and invests the rest of it very wisely in a nice varied portfolio, so that if and when Andy gets out, he will have a nice, and it's spread across, and it's like in a safe deposit box or something, and that's what the key is for, is where the driver's license and all that stuff is. So Norton and his cronies go down because Andy, when he escaped, he took evidence with him of the money laundering, and that's why Norton ends up killing himself to take the coward's way out, and the head guard gets arrested. That's not the case in the novella, where I guess some of the money laundering or whatever comes to light, but to avoid a scandal, because Norton, because of his like in and out program, which exists in both, where like, he essentially slave labors some of the prisoners, was so successful, and they don't want to diminish that they allow him to retire quietly and go off into obscurity. And then the guard, I don't think, ever gets implicated in anything. Because he was happy because Andy helped him keep the $35,000 he got from his brother tax free, which the equivalent now is like $400,000 or something like that. So yeah, I think he ends up becoming warden after Norton retires. So yeah, definitely different ending there for those two characters. And I like the fact that at least one of them gets arrested.
Uh-huh.
I've heard it before if both of them had gotten arrested, but what are you gonna do?
Uh-huh.
And then obviously the movie ends with Red finding the letter from, he goes to the oak tree, it finds the wall, finds in this case a box, not the key because Andy found it, and left him a note, and he's like, hey, here's some cash if you want to come visit me in Mexico. I sure could use some help running this little resort that I built. And Red's all like, screw this, I'm breaking parole and going to Mexico.
Mm-hmm.
And in the movie they end up getting reunited. We know that they actually do get reunited, but in the book it ends before that, so we actually don't know. We don't know for sure if Andy made it and has actually been successful in building his dream life in Mexico, because Red never gets there by the end of the book. And again, we only get his assumption on how Andy accomplished his escape, because until he reaches Andy and gets Andy's actual story, it's all just Red's speculation. So I think that's the biggest thing with why the movie, I think, is so much probably more popular than the novella, is because we get more character development and character depth. So you end up loving the good guys and hating the bad guys, and you end up, if you're me, crying over Brooks.
Yep. And getting a little closure at the end, because you kind of have more of an ending, as it were.
Yes.
I mean, I wouldn't mind with the novella if, Stephen King decides to go back and, hey, like, maybe, guys, which of my short stories do you think deserves a sequel?
Yeah.
This one would be one of them. Like,
yeah.
Did they make it?
Yeah.
What kind of investigation thing do we have to find out when, somebody stumbles upon something in Mexico and, oh, yeah, those two made it out, man. Do we have stories to tell you about their time in?
Yeah. Yeah.
I can just imagine some of the stories and hijinks they could get up to in Mexico.
Oh, yeah. Definitely. Yeah. So, but yeah, the fact that this movie was essentially a flop, and it wasn't until again
the heck out of
rentals is what helped seal the deal for it. So, and eventually, obviously, streaming, DVDs, anniversary editions, have helped a lot. It is considered one of the best movies of all time. It has been voted it's one of, I think, 5 movies on IMDb that's ever reached the number 1 slot in the top 250 movies of all time.
Wow.
Yeah. Yeah. It's extremely beloved. It's obviously, it's emotional. It's not like one you're just going to pop on to have on in the background. Hence all the people tell it, saying, oh, if it's on, I'm stopping. We can thank Ted Turner for that, by the way, because Ted Turner ended up selling the TV airing rights to TNT, which he owned, for cheaper than normal. So if you remember watching Shawshank on TNT a lot, that is why.
Mm-hmm.
I think I read somewhere that as of like 20, I think it was like the count was from like a decade ago or something, so I'm sure it's even higher now, but like it's aired on TV the equivalent of like 6 or 7 years.
Wow. It's
of like running. If you added all the runtime from it airing on TV from the time that Ted Turner got the rights and started airing it, at any other times it's been aired on TV, it's been like the equivalent of like 7 years.
Wow. Depending on when this drops, it is actually airing on TNT this weekend. Not TNT, TBS this weekend.
There you go.
Yep.
There you go.
It looks like it's the non-edited version because I quick hit did access and did the download through the TBS on demand, and it was the unedited because it said TVMA, so there was no editing. It was true from
it's the stuff with the sisters is way more graphic in the novella.
I would imagine
they kind of leave you to your imagination in the movie.
Oh yeah.
Other than the one confrontation where the one head sister threatens to put the like screwdriver or whatever through Andy's brain, and he's like, well, you don't have to do that. I'm gonna bite down, and it ain't gonna be pretty. I'm gonna be biting either way, so take your pick. Yeah. But yeah, there's some stuff in the novella that is way more graphic when it comes to the stuff with the sisters. There's definitely some harsh language because of the variety of people that are imprisoned at both imprisoned and working at Shawshank. There are some very unsavory terms.
Oh yeah.
Mostly for ethnicities and or religions.
And considering the time period, that was all they knew back then.
Yeah. So there's like the N word gets used several times, which I understand. Because of the context, it fits. But then there's some others, other not so pleasant terms that are also used that some people may not be that familiar with. Just know they're still derogatory, even if you don't recognize it.
Yes.
And then there's just some names that they come up, like all the the guards and stuff are called screws. Yeah. I guess because they put they screw you over, or they put the screw on you.
Yep.
So it's the book is the novella. It's a short read. It's only 4 hours, the audiobook. So it's an easy, if you're within 4 hours of driving distance, hey, there you go. You can be finishing up at the time you're pulling into the driveway. Give or take a few minutes. I think it adds some context. But also listening to it, I realized how much they added and fleshed out a lot of things in the movie, and I'm grateful for that because it does make it a much more compelling story in the film. And the cast is fabulous. This wasn't Morgan Freeman's first movie. This was the first movie where he did a significant voiceover. So this is where our love for hearing Morgan Freeman talk came from. So
it wasn't Bruce Almighty.
oh, that's much later.
Yeah.
Obviously Tim Robbins, is great as Andy. I mean, neither of them fit the description. I mean, in the book, Red is white. He's a white guy with red hair. He's Irish. He looks like you expect an Irishman. Of course, they kept that kept that line in there because it's funny in the movie. But the fact that Red's last name is like Reddington or something like that, so you can also joke that say that's where the nickname Red came from. But I think he likes to tell people it's because I'm Irish, and then people are like, "Wait, but you're black." Hey, there's black people in Ireland. Andy is like supposed to be like this tiny little guy, and like Tim Robbins is like the tallest person in the entire cast.
Yeah.
So they're like, watch and see how many scenes Tim Robbins is not standing up straight.
He's hunched over. Yeah.
He's hunched over. He's sitting down. He's reaching for something, or he's by himself. And he's filmed at an angle that still makes him look shorter than the like 6'3" or 6'4", 6'5", whatever the hell it is that he is. He's like stupid tall, comparatively to everybody else in the cast. So, yeah. So, you guys have any thoughts? Or anything? Brittany is our main person.
If you haven't watched it and you're on the fence, give it a try. Because this is my first time watching it completely through. Because I think I've watched like one half when it first, half of it when it first came out, and then finished the rest of it, a few years down the road, because it didn't click. But being able to sit down and watch it, man, appreciation for it. I mean, Stephen King, what can you say? The man can do genre stuff.
Yes. Yeah.
And having from what you said, pretty much a faithful adaptation, because I'm probably going to read the short story now. So,
yep. I mean, he definitely knows how to turn a phrase. There are several lines in the novella where I'm like, damn, that's a good line. No wonder you're considered such a good writer.
Or if it's a comeback, it's just like, why in the heck haven't I thought of that before? Man, I gotta remember to use that.
Yeah. It's like, yeah, that's a good line. So, yeah. Say what you will about Stephen King. I know he's not everyone's cup of tea when it comes to, an author, modern author, modern American author, I guess.
Sometimes
because I think when people hear Stephen King, they immediately think of horror. They think of Carrie, they think of Pet Sematary, they think of It. Anybody that's ever been scared of clowns probably has Stephen King to thank for it. That or John Wayne Gacy, depending on your age, I guess. Or both, maybe. But he's got stuff that isn't necessarily straight up horror. This is very grounded in reality. The Green Mile has some supernatural stuff, but it's not horror necessarily. Obviously something like The Body, again, not supernatural. It is a story about a group of friends, as they're still in their youth, but eventually, are looking on the horizon of, becoming adults and what that means. So yeah, he's got some good stuff out there. So, pick something. Odds are you're going to find something you like, I would hope, with as extensive his catalog is.
If you like time travel and history, he did one where somebody travels back in time to try to stop the assassination of President Kennedy.
1922-63.
Yes.
Yep.
It's a very decent and interesting read.
And was adapted into a miniseries a few years ago. I think with James Franco.
I think so.
Celine?
Because I think it aired on FX.
Yeah, from what I understand, it's not a terrible adaptation.
No, it's decent. It's decent.
Yeah. I mean, when you're talking Stephen King adaptations, you have like, this,
The Stand,
The Stand,
the original,
and well, Carrie's not like really faithful, but like the vibe is there. So it gives you
Langoliers.
Yeah,
I think the vibe was there. I haven't read the story, but from what I've heard, that one's pretty accurate.
Yeah. And then you've got like the other end, which apparently I've never read or seen it, but from what I understand, the Dark Tower is just like, forget that ever happened.
I have to go back. I made it about halfway through the Dark Tower, the first book. Yeah. And then I lost track, and I want to go back and read them because I've heard they're supposed to be good, but I've heard, stay away from the movie with Matthew McConaughey.
Yeah.
It's like they didn't do good.
Yeah. So, and hey, go follow Stephen King on social media. He has a corgi. Did I mention he has a corgi? Her name is Molly, aka the Thing of Evil.
Thing of Evil. Oh, yeah. And she knows it too. She's like, I know I got this nickname. I'm living up to it because some of those pictures. I mean, just that corgi grin and look on her face. She's like, I know I'm getting attention, but the deviousness is.
Yes.
It's there.
Yeah. She is she's a corgi, all right.
Mm-hmm.
So, in fact, I believe
is she a Pembroke?
No, well, I'm not sure what she is. She's on the darker side, so she could either be a Pembroke or a cardigan. I'd have to see her up close to be able to know for sure. But I believe this Christmas, I think, is her 10th gotcha anniversary.
Oh, cool.
So she's been a member of the King household 10 years this Christmas, I believe. So, or maybe it was last Christmas. Either way, he's had her for about 10 years. So plenty of time to do lots of evil deeds.
Yes.
As corgis are wont to do.
Yes. Mm-hmm. And probably help Daddy with some plotting of some evil things.
Yes. Yeah.
What do you think, sweetie?
Yeah. Molly agrees. That means it's a fabulous idea. Alrighty. Well, if any of our listeners want to give their 2 cents on the Shawshank Redemption, either the book and or the movie, or maybe you've seen the stage play.
Oh, that's right. I forgot there was a stage play.
Yeah, there was a stage version. And you wanna tell us about that? Feel free to send us feedback, or maybe give us your favorite Stephen King story. Whatever. Or what you think Molly, aka the Thing of Evil's next evil deed will be. I don't know. You can send us feedback. Email address is fiveishfangirls@gmail.com. Or you can go to our website, which is the fiveishfangirls.com, where you can connect with all of our podcast related social media accounts and our individual ones as well. I posted a few pictures of my adventures, including the tour of several of the reformatory and some of the other filming locations, and the castle where Chauncey and I had dinner Saturday night. Shout out to the I keep wanting to call it the wrong name. So want to make sure I get it right. It's kind of a mouthful. But shout out to the where did I post it with the right name? Here it is. the Landless Mohican Castle. Landl's Mohican Castle. Yeah, I still screwed it up. I'm looking right at it. I still said it wrong. Landl's Mohican Castle. It's in Ashland County, about 45 minutes south-ish of Mansfield. It looks like a D&D castle, and a log cabin had a baby. Is what it essentially looks like. But it's tucked out in the woods. And it's very pretty. And there's a restaurant called the Copper Mug and Bar and Grill that Chauncey and I had dinner at, which we absolutely inhaled. And there happened to be a wedding going on at the same time, because it also doubles as a wedding venue. And the ceremony had finished by the time we got there. And they were headed into the reception, but we went to walk around a little bit after eating, and the bride and groom were getting puttered around a golf cart with their photographer taking pictures. So that was kind of fun. I was like, I remember that, being trotted around all over the place in my wedding dress and saying, "Here, smile. Act like you've not been up all day and have barely gotten anything to eat. Always eat on your wedding. Hey guys, even if you have to fight for it.
You don't want a hangry bride.
No, you don't. I'd heard so many stories about brides not getting any or hardly any food. I'm like, that's not happening to me. But yes, we did go to a castle and had dinner, and it was lovely. If you're in the area, you have time, you don't mind driving a little bit out of your way. Even from there, actually, it was still 4 hours home. It was just more of a straight shot west instead of having to go south and then west. I'll put links to all the things in the show notes. And again, I will put some pictures up on our Facebook of the reformatory, so you can get an idea of some of the stuff I'm talking about. And you can also find the link to the book club. So yes. Just because Traveling the Vortex is hanging up their hat does not mean that the book club is going anywhere, even though it will continue to keep it named after them. They're the ones that helped start. So we will keep the book club going, and I'm sure the guys will continue to be involved in discussions over there on Goodreads. You can find the link to that on our website. And if you want to help keep this show going with a little bit of your monies, you can do that either via Ko-fi with a single donation, or you can become a regular supporter on Patreon. We definitely appreciate all of our supporters. Or you can buy merch on our shop on Redbubble. So however you decide to support us, whether it's just your money or just a like or a reshare or repost or whatever the heck things are called these days, we greatly appreciate all the support, and glad that I was able to do something a little interesting. To be able to actually visit a filming location of a movie for us to review. So how often can you say that?
Exactly.
So unless anybody has anything else, I guess we shall sign off for this week.
This is Brittany and Bangle saying goodnight.
This is Holly from Wisconsin saying good evening.
And this is Rachel in Indianapolis, Indiana. Remember, Red, hope is a good thing. Maybe the best of things. And no good thing ever dies. thank you, our Fiveish fam, for joining us on this week's geeky journey. If you enjoyed the show, don't forget to subscribe, rate, and review. Stay connected with us on our website, thefiveishfangirls.com, and follow us on most social media with @FiveishFangirls. Plus, check out our nonprofit, Fangirls Give Back, to see how we're making a positive impact in our community. Until next time, stay nerdy and let the squee continue.